Um, background checks, waiting periods, gun shows.
Here we go. So,
This is what we talked about a little bit earlier, and
yeah.
what Andrew, I know disagrees with me on something. So
So
let's.
I believe in more stringent background checks, and feel like mental health checks should also be a thing. And if I had my way, we'd do it like Japan does it, where you have a re-up every X amount of years. I think it is. I don't think it's every year. That's a little extreme. But Japan has it where you once you own a gun, you're saying yes, I am volunteering to be like every. I can't even tell you how many years it is between each recertification. But like for Japan, I mean, in Japan, like you have a gun, you're required to own a gun safe. You keep your gun and your ammunition separate in the gun safe. I think somebody comes to your home and looks at your gun safe and makes sure everything's good to go.
Police
And then
officer.
and then you also do psychological testing because I mean, also suicide is a huge thing in Japan. That's another story. Um, because I mean, and also with gun shows, going to a gun show and looking at guns is fine. I do not think that you should be able to walk out that day with the gun. I think that's a huge oversight, and I think that people who don't shouldn't own guns do end up getting guns because of stuff like that, and it's perfectly legal, and I hate it.
So is that just a
Um,
gun show thing or private sales in general? Because ultimately, a gun show is just a mass private sale.
right, and obviously, private sale is a much harder snake to pin down on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a whole. And I think that would be a whole other thing because if you try to ban private sales altogether, that's never going to
Oof.
happen in the USA, you know, because gun ownership and all that stuff and how deeply ingrained it is in our history.
Yeah.
I personally would feel better at night if gun shows, if you're like, okay, cool, I want to buy the gun. All right, sweet. In 3 days, we'll ship gun shows are not that hard off to wait 3 days for a gun. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they could definitely close down, wait 3 days for the checks to clear, and then say, all right, cool, and you can come back here in 3 days, collect your gun or whatever. You know, I think that wouldn't be hard at all. People just don't do it because they don't want to.
So I think when it comes to actual like criminal background checks, besides like your odd and end like shotgun shop that's like, give me a little extra money, you can take it now without the background check. Which we do have issues with like gun stores doing stuff like that. But besides that, like the actual like criminal background checks do work pretty well. In fact, a criminal background check from the FBI for buying a gun comes back faster than when you join the military.
Really?
Like
Really,
we had a guy like straight up like we were in boot camp. Like a month later, they're like, "Hey, you gotta go. You had something on your criminal record that you didn't tell us, so you're out."
Wow.
And I think that's absurd for one. But anyways,
Absolutely.
um, so I think the actual criminal background check is good for now, unless they give you like a reason, like maybe like have ATF or FBI like do like or even like some state agency like do audits on like gun stores, and then like you do have. I fully support the whole psych eval. Because like we do run into people like issues where like mental health is definitely a huge issue with like what was it, most of these like mass shootings are due to mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know the whole argument like, oh, I don't want to pay for a psych eval. Like if you want this gun, like maybe have it so that way like it's subsidized somehow, but you don't like completely like make the government pay for it. Like if you want a gun, like maybe you gotta pitch in a little bit too, pay for like the fees. Um, gun show. I'm all for gun sales at a gun show, but it needs to be regulated
Mm-hmm.
because that is a good place where someone can go and buy one without having someone go like, "Hey, criminal? No, all right, you're good." Um, maybe have something like that for like uh, gun shows. Like, hey, if you have your CCW, you're all dead because obviously you have a background check done.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're good. Those that don't have a CCW, maybe have like a waiting period and have like whoever's hosting the gun show like do a background check or something along those lines, or even have like maybe even have like an officer like at the front door like run like background checks that like get like names like run it back or get like a list of people that want to buy a gun without CCW. Uh, have like a list of like people that are attempting to buy a gun, and like the cop could pull up your criminal record right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's like any like felonies, then obviously they can't buy the gun. So there has to be some sort of regulation when it comes to gun shows.
So do you think it should it be some type of law enforcement, or could it be like a, I know FFL is Florida, but like an FFL dealer, basically some type of certified person for gun transactions, or do you think it should be for at gun shows an actual law enforcement?
Um, Maybe have like a third entity do it, like a third like organization that does it, that
Mm-hmm.
has access to that stuff,
Okay.
that can pull it up pretty quickly, like through like a driver's license number or like social security number, stuff like that.
Okay, so my take on background checks.
Let's
Background
hear it.
checks,
Let's hear it.
background checks, completely agree with. We need to have them. I agree with that. Waiting period, I could take it or leave it. I'm not going to fight for that. But psych evals. My only thing about that is what I'd like to hear your definition, because you may be talking about something I agree with, but before, I'd like to hear what you would have them look for.
I personally would be looking for someone with and instability is such a broad term, but
Mhm.
I would look for someone with aggression issues, or those questions they ask. They go, do you ever get angry, and do you ever do you ever feel like you have to vent that anger? And sort of there's ways that they ask them that they can find out the truth for that stuff. And
Mhm.
obviously people can lie, but for me it adds an extra step. That you have to bullshit your way through if you were gonna bullshit through.
Yeah.
So you
And,
almost seem like you would want the psych eval at the time of like getting the concealed weapons permit, like that make that a part of the process.
I would, but I would also want.
Are you talking about like if I go say for instance I go to a gun store and I say I want to buy this gun? Are you saying that I would have to go like with an internet psychiatrist real quick and answer questions with them and just have them okay good, or
I
we
feel
could do like some sort of like certification like that has like a 2 or 3 year like time limit. So that way like Tinkerbell has a good point that you run into like HIPAA laws and stuff like that. Well, if you have like the certification like that's signed off by a psychiatrist, like hey, he's not a danger to himself or anyone around him, he
Mhm.
could buy this gun. Like maybe have one that's like has like some sort of yeah, have it in person. Don't have it like, oh, fill this out. Like have it in person so that way they can actually see your body language, facial expressions, and then have like a 1 or 2 year like time limit. I don't think five. I think 5 years is too long because something traumatic can happen during that time frame and completely flop your psyche, your like mental state.
Mhm.
So I think like 1 or 2 years is good. I don't think you need like maybe like get one every 2 years to maintain your CCW.
I was gonna say, so on that CCW is 5 years, at least in Florida.
Oh, okay.
Would
I
you
don't know
would you
what it
want
is
to
here,
change that too?
Minnesota. I feel like 5 years is too long.
You feel like it's too long?
Yeah.
Because a lot can happen in 5 years.
Exactly. Maybe like instead of like having to get like keep the CCW like every 5 years, but you have to like maintain like that psyche valve.
That I would say at the time of getting your concealed weapons permit, when I went, there's the person that fingerprints you and then they take your picture. If that person was trained to do that and I didn't have to make a second trip out of my way to go do this, I think that I would be fine with that. If I just had to, they had to ask me a couple extra questions, etc. I think that I would be fine with that part. Does that sound like? Would you want it to be like? Would it be okay just someone who's like been trained and certified, or would you want it to be an actual psychiatrist, actual psychologist?
I would feel better at being an actual psychiatrist, to be honest, because some people don't get like that years of training of like being able to read body language, facial like features, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They won't be able to ask the targeted questions that actually mean something. They'll just be like, all right, you want to hurt yourself or others? No. Cool. Do you have criminal intent? No.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. It'll be another box for them to check off as opposed to an actual look at somebody, making sure they clear.
Yeah. Which that part, I mean, if it's just a basic questionnaire or something and we have a set, if this gets answered this way, fine. But with my problem that I have with anything mental, medical, psych, etc., is ultimately it's going to come up to an interpretation. So You have
Valid.
someone who has a history of depression. You could have a psychiatrist immediately that they just say, "Oh, hard no for me," while
Right.
9 out of 10 say, so many Americans suffer from that it's something that can be overcome, that you can still be on certain medication and a responsible gun owner, but you're gonna get those odds and ends that say no, and then the problem is once it's up to that person then who just got that no, are they going do are they stuck for a set amount of time that they're not allowed to do again, or are they going to
Right.
go to another psychiatrist and get approved at that one? Because the problem that will thing is then it'll just bring into question the whole process. Say, why are we even doing this if people can just bounce around until someone finally says yes?
I would stipulate that there would be like that there can be a I forget what the official term is, but basically it's like you're objecting to that psychiatrist's finding, and you're putting because I officially object to this finding, and I'm going to go to a second psychiatrist that's unrelated to this first one
Mm-hmm.
and get another finding. I feel like if two separate psychiatrists both find you not unworthy, but incompatible
You
with
are
having it,
unworthy.
you are unworthy. I think if there's two separate no's, that's much more defining than one no, just because of a preset prejudice. Like two separate no's would be much more telling than one person be like, all right, depression, no.
So what happens if you're in a city such as Portland or Los Angeles that is highly majority leaning left? Then what are the odds they get someone who is against guns and are going to mark people no, and it's just kind of runs rampant in the city because of such a mass belief? My whole thought process with this whole psych thing and medical background check, I attribute all to Murphy's law. Anything that can happen will happen, and that's what I'm worried about. Is all of a sudden you're allowing these civilians to determine how many people can carry guns, and
Right.
ultimately could be affecting a large number of Americans from being able to protect themselves.
That's true.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's why
it's
I
not
highly disagree with it.
it's not a perfect thing right in the conversation, but you could also argue that the current gun laws we have now also aren't perfect, which is extremely true.
Mm-hmm.
People,
Well,
I feel like no matter what system you have, people are going to fall through the cracks
yeah,
regardless. But from what we've been talking about, this would make me personally feel better about people who own guns.
Mm-hmm.
So and then that's all it is. It's just an opinion, like
Yeah.
obviously getting anything more than just opinion and ratifying and clarifying of that would take years of discussions and bullying and shouting at people. So this is just what would make me feel personally safe for my little view of the world. We're not safe, but safe now.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. So let's see if we can find a compromise on this that we all agree with. So I already agree with the idea of when you're getting your CCW, having some type of small evaluation. I don't see
Absolutely.
that as an issue because ultimately, if that's person, all they're doing is collecting information from you.
Right.
When you actually go to the building to get your license, all they're doing is taking your license or taking your fingerprints, taking your pictures, and if they added an extra questionnaire in there, or even if they just had um, whether it be
5 minute session.
third party or government appointed little like thing for a 5 minute session, that's fine because
Yeah.
I mean there's a huge influx of people trying to get their licenses, but when I went in the middle of the day because I went on my lunch break, and it was me and two other people. So I don't see there being a huge backlog if we did some type of small thing while they're there. But I don't agree with going to a private business, having to
Yeah.
get a signed off form that says you're good to go, and then going to get my concealed weapons permit. I don't agree with that part.
I was offering that as opposed to like an internet questionnaire at the gun store. Like
what about, because you were talking about like in California where you'll get like the bias. What about like trying to find like a middle ground that like find someone um who's going to be unbiased. If you can't find anyone unbiased, find someone that's right leaning and find someone that are licensed psychiatrists, one that's right leaning, one that's left leaning. Have them in Florida, they have the Department of Agriculture where they can do the CCW. Maybe have it like centralized, part of like the city, like part of like the city or state,
Mm-hmm.
where it's all in one place. That way, you
Mhm.
don't have to go like to multiple places, and to help offset the costs, you have to pay. You have to pay like the fees for like your CCW. You
Yeah.
can do the same for the Psych eval. It may not be as much, but at least there, so that way they can make it that way they can make it more difficult for you to slip, like those that shouldn't have them, slip through the cracks.
So two questions on that.
Okay.
So question one, does that mean that you think that the psychiatrist should post their political opinions? And
No.
two, does that
Mhm.
mean crap, I forgot answer question one. I'm thinking about question two. I already forgot it.
um, well, until you remember it, with question one, I don't think. I mean, so their political saying should not matter. It
Mhm.
shouldn't. Like I said, they should be unbiased. But I try to look at things as an unbiased way as much as possible. Like I try to do my research before I come to conclusions.
Mhm.
But everyone is subject to jumping to their bias. Like everyone is. It's if you say you aren't, then you're lying. You
Agreed.
obviously like everyone does. Um, and if you try someone that's as close to the middle as possible, like
Mhm.
find someone that is pro Second Amendment. I still don't think they're like um, I still don't think their political standing should matter, but like you said, like someone that might be against guns that jump in and be like try to like deny as many people as possible for it.
But
Um,
I feel like if that happened, then like if someone was like, "Hey, like, wow, like this person refuses 9 out of 10 people that go to them," like that's a question. I feel like something like
yeah,
that
that's
would
true.
stand out and get flagged in and of
So
itself.
what type of penalty do you think should be charged for that if we moved in that direction? Do you think it should just be they're not allowed to certify people anymore, or do you think that that should actually be some type of penalty on their license?
I feel like it would be. I think the only thing that would be realistic to expect is them not being allowed to certify people for gun ownership
Yeah,
because
because then you're gonna
noticing
mess
a
with their
bias
livelihood.
noticing a bias in data is one thing. Proving an outright objective, I'm not going to pass you because of personal feelings is much harder.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it'd be like, okay, well, like he just can't earn that extra income for certifying people anymore. That's it. You just get checked over. The rolling machine of bureaucracy would take over that.
Yeah,
I got you. So for a compromise, because again, the maybe over time the whole private thing might get on me. I just see so many issues bringing in the private sector on that. Um,
Right.
do would you compromise and say that you can have the option to get it yourself? Just same thing with concealed weapons permit. You can get certified by someone who's certified to certify, or you can go through an actual like class. Do you think it should be
Yeah.
the same concept where you can go to a third party private business if you want to, and they have the right to say yes, you're good to go and give you a thing, but
Mhm.
also having that person at the Department of Agriculture for the people that don't necessarily want to do that?
Yeah.
Would compromise be having both, or do you think that would just be too much overkill and it's kind of
I feel like realistically, having both would be nice because it gives you some options.
mm-hmm,
And I feel like if we were going to actually implement that in real life, I feel like having those options at first would be pivotal, and then maybe over time be like, okay, it's gone from having the option to do either to now we're just doing one.
yeah,
You
because it
know,
also brings in on what Tinkerbell just made me think of. She said maybe having the doctor sign off on the form issued by the Department of Agriculture. Um, so another thing that brings into is that is technically, you know, either a mental health checkup or a medical checkup. And for the people who don't have insurance, it makes it harder for them to be able to get approved to get their concealed weapon permit. So then the argument could be made that for people who don't have the money or don't have insurance or don't have the ability to pay for that eval, um, are we just denying it? Like, oh, you're not allowed to have your permit because you can't afford to go see a psychiatrist.
True, which is a problem in of itself. But you could also make the argument that if you can't afford whatever small fees are for the CCW class and the psychiatrist and that stuff, how are you going to afford a $500, $600, $800 gun? You know.
Both of you got gifted it or inherited it.
Very true. Very true. Okay.
I mean,
Valid point.
I
Valid
will
point, yeah.
say
Very true.
that is a very good point because I went because the something that my wife's work does is that like we get like credits towards our HSA, like depending on what like if we go get like a physical stuff like that. I went and got a physical, and if we didn't have insurance, that shit would have been like $800-900.
Mm-hmm.
That's just for a physical. So that is a good point. That like would like your if you don't have insurance, would you have to pay for that? Like that's a very valid point, and I can see where you're coming from with it.
Yeah, so that's
Especially,
that's another reason that I think would attribute to just if we're gonna do it all in the same building because you already that can be maybe we raise the CCW fees, you know, $25, $30,
Right.
Because it's not gonna necessarily be a thing that's you're not gonna be sitting there for an hour. So maybe we just raise the fees $20-30 because that would be way more realistic than expecting all these people to pay that. So
so
as a compromise, I would definitely be okay with
if you have the insurance and while you're there and you know maybe you already have regular checkups or something or you just have the insurance to cover it, by all means if you go ahead and do it, that's just one you can get X amount, like maybe if you bring it with you, you get $50 knocked off the price of your CCW or something. Like
sure.
Like both options, I think if we did it as both that'd be fine. But I just see again that personally if I had to do it, I would rather do it there. This getting the private sector involved just seems a little too much for me. But I'd compromise and say, you know, if they sign off on it, that's fine.
I'd be okay with that too. Then yeah.
Sweet. And then as
the point you raised about the whole cost of it, that is a really good point.
And then that would prevent the need for background for medical because you know that would be. I mean, HIPAA laws, and it would just create too much thing because you get someone who thinks that, oh, you suffered from depression 2 years ago, so you're going to go kill yourself as soon as you buy this.
Absolutely. And as someone who works with Baker Acts on a semi-regular basis, I can tell you that the majority of people who are or have been Baker Acts, people who have just had a bad day. Mm-hmm. That's really it. Now, granted, there are some nut cases out there. I've taken a few. But majority of people who have Baker acted are people who are sound reasonable, people who just had a bad day. That's all it was.